So, hello everybody, welcome to our LinkedIn Live. And actually, it's a super special one today because we have a special guest from DutyCX, James Edmonds, with us today, and our very own Lee Jones too. The topic, the differences between customer experiences and outcomes, very much a focus right now, particularly for those who are impacted by consumer duty. So a lot of businesses are at the moment. So excited about the conversation. Would encourage people to participate in the chat as well. We'll be monitoring that around our conversations. So without further ado, I will pass to my colleague Lee to do a quick intro. Lee?
Thank you, Rob. So welcome everyone. Great to see you and speak to you this morning. I'm one of the growth directors at Elevate, and I've been working in customer experience for about 25 years. So got a bit of experience to share, and I'm going to be doing a little bit in a moment, just talking about some of the observations we have of what drives a customer-centric culture. So look forward to speaking to you all in a moment.
Excellent. Thank you, Lee, and thank you to everyone for joining. My name is James Edmonds. I'm the Managing Director of DutyCX, along with holding various other roles across financial services, focusing on customer outcomes and vulnerability with a company called Morgan Ashley, many of you will have heard of. I started DutyCX earlier this year to help companies in financial services bridge the gap between consumer duty requirements and customer experience. I spent the last 3 years developing propositions focused solely on consumer duty legislation. And in the last nearly 20 years, I've worked at a lot of financial services, most notably Legal & General, Royal Sun Alliance, More Than while at Royal Sun Alliance, Just Retirement, James Hay and Nucleus. But as I said, more recently specialising in interpretation of FCA guidelines to help companies differentiate. So moving on to the first slide that we're going to go through today, which is really around understanding the difference between customer experience and customer outcomes. Really key concepts here that we want to begin to focus in on. So customer experience refers to how customers feel during their interactions with the business, whether the processes are smooth, engaging and satisfying, etc. Customer outcomes, however, linked but are slightly different in that they represent the tangible results the customer achieves from using the product or service that they take out. Whether it meets their needs, offers fair value and provides long-term benefits, being very important, obviously. The distinction matters because consumer duty requires a business to focus not only on providing positive experiences, but also ensuring that customers achieve good and fair outcomes. So a business might deliver a brilliant experience, but fail to meet the customer's actual original needs if the outcome doesn't align with their best interests. So this is where I've developed a little bit of a framework we're going to be getting into a little bit later, called the Edmonds Experience and Outcomes Matrix. So following slides will outline this matrix, which focuses on aligning customer experience with consumer duty requirements by ensuring that businesses not only provide excellent customer experiences, but also deliver fair and tangible outcomes. Models built around continuous monitoring of customer outcomes through feedback loops and advanced reporting, ensuring alignment with the 4 outcomes of consumer duty. Okay, thank you very much. So understanding the difference between customer experience and customer outcomes. So let's start by breaking down the difference between the two. We often hear the terms together, but they do actually mean very different things. So experience, again, as I mentioned a moment ago, is all about how the customer feels during their journey. Is it engaging? Do they feel looked after, or is it more like pulling teeth? I've had my fair share of challenges with this when working within organisations. So I was head of customer experience at a retirement product provider, where it literally took a year for customers to leave us. So you can imagine the difficulty in that situation, in that role. You're asking customers for feedback in that situation. How satisfied are you with our service? Well, the service is fine, but I'm actually still here 12 months later, so I'm not exactly loving it. So it's a very difficult balance to get right, and we certainly weren't winning any awards based on those experiences. Then the customer outcomes. So this is where the real value lies. Outcomes are the tangible results a customer gets from interacting with you. Did the product or service solve their problem? Did it meet their original needs? You can have the best experience in the world, but if the outcome doesn't deliver, then the whole process is essentially a failure as far as the customer is concerned and as far as you're concerned from a consumer duty perspective. So it matters under consumer duty, especially now, because it's an outcome framework rather than an experience framework. It's not about just providing positive experience, but delivering the fair outcome as well. So this brings us to the Edmonds Experience versus Outcome Matrix, which was developed with the input of various other people across customer experience and consumer duty. So it originally was developed in relation only to consumer duty, but actually the further I've got into it, the more I realised that it's applicable across any type of service environment. The idea is very simple. It's not just about a smooth ride, it's about ensuring that the customer gets to the right destination at the same time. So in the following slide, I'll walk you through the matrix and how it helps businesses monitor both experiences and outcomes continuously. So into the matrix itself, it's designed to evaluate how well your customer experience aligns with the outcomes it receives, and it breaks down into 4 quadrants, as you can see, and I'll briefly explain each of those. So a good experience and a good outcome, exactly where you want to be. This is the sweet spot. So here, customers have a smooth, seamless experience, and the product or service delivers exactly what was promised. A good experience and a poor outcome. In this case, experience is great, but the actual product or service doesn't meet the needs. The customer is happy during the process, but the end result leaves them disappointed. Poor outcome and a good experience. This is an interesting one. The customer's journey is tough. They face friction along the way. They don't particularly enjoy it, but the outcome is great. So despite a painful process, the result is still worth it as far as the customer is concerned. And then finally, a poor experience and a poor outcome. So very much the danger zone. You'll see the dinosaur picture there. That's really where companies don't want to be and where they won't be growing, where they'll be losing customers. Both experience and outcome are poor, high dissatisfaction, complaints and churn. This is really where you don't want to be. The additional real value of the matrix can be applied through multiple lenses. So you can begin to understand how you could assess different brands that might exist within one organization through the matrix. You could look at different customer cohorts and how vulnerable customers, for example, how their experience and outcomes might differ versus non-vulnerable customers. You can map individual customer journeys to the matrix. So some might fall in one part of the matrix and some might fall into another. And then products and services, you could evaluate whether different products and services within your organization are offering different experiences or outcome levels for your customers. So as I said earlier, while it was originally built with consumer duty in mind, a powerful tool for any service environment, whether you're selling yachts, software, subscriptions, you want your customers to have a good experience and a good outcome. I'm going to hand over to Lee now from Elevate, and he's going to take you through some examples of where these lenses can be applied.
Great, thank you, James. And I think this is really super useful because I can think of a number of experiences I've had that I would say is probably a good experience, but then downstream you've realised that it's not been the best outcome for me as a consumer. And I love the fact that actually the FCA are putting some focus on this now. And so if I just pick up and start to think about what have we at Elevate, what have I observed, what have we observed around those businesses that can achieve both good experience and good outcomes, so your perfect match. Actually, I think that really the only way that you can get there is through having a customer-centric culture. I truly believe that. If you think about superficial satisfaction, where you've got a good experience and a bad outcome, I think in the past you could achieve that by doing certain things right. You could have a continual improvement work stream. You might even be measuring NPS. You might put some really good projects in place that just make retention or service or sales process much better. But actually, to get to that perfect match, I think organizations are going to have a bit of work to do. And some are getting it right and some are not. So let's have a little think. So which organizations do we all think are truly customer-centric? And so I'd ask anyone that's joined us to be thinking about, when have you had a really good customer experience and outcome? And which are those businesses that have delivered that for you? I don't imagine for 1 minute it's every business you deal with and every service business you deal with. So think about the ones that you think are truly customer centric, and some of those might be ones that you've never dealt with, but you just know they are. So I've drawn up a few. Some of these are global businesses, some of them are UK businesses, and I think you'd probably look at that list and have some appreciation that they're doing some stuff right in the customer space. And we've looked at a number of these businesses, and we've had the opportunity to work with a few as well. And we've really looked at these businesses and ones that we've worked with, and we tried to profile and look at what are the things that are common in those businesses. And going to take some time, 10-15 minutes, just to break that down and give you some insight and some views. It's not the truth, but it's our version of it. But first of all, just before we look at what we think is driving good customer experience and outcome, I'd be inclined to just open up the question. I do ask this question quite a lot when we're running this session in senior groups or in other webinars. is what do senior leaders believe drives a customer-centric culture? And I'd invite Rob and James to chip in if you've got any ideas. We can make this conversational. But I think typically the same things come up. And just be intrigued, Rob, James, chip in. What do you think would be some of the answers to this question?
Do you want me to go first, James?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So I think obviously slightly biasly as we work together, but I will share what I think I've observed senior leaders doing or businesses doing where they have a genuine belief that it's going to shape a customer-centric culture. Yeah. So things like single focus KPIs. So focusing on, for example, NPS in isolation, maybe, rather than looking at a holistic view. Tech first or tech only solutions. So things like self-service platforms and that kind of thing, with the belief that's what customers want, and that's all about customer outcomes. Whereas in fact, it could well be about cost saving or efficiency gain, for example. I think when you then get into the cultural stuff, I think you and I know, and I'm sure James has had similar experiences, that just stating a culture or a cultural direction doesn't make it a thing. So just going, we're going to be the most customer-centric business in the UK in this sector, doesn't mean that just happens. And I tend to see there's a lot of things like public-facing CSR initiatives. So whilst it's great PR, it doesn't mean necessarily that your employees are kind of going in that direction and understand even what good looks like. Yeah. So whenever we're looking at this stuff holistically across organizations, we'll look at top down, bottom up, and the employee voice as a key part of that, rather than just what the billboard says, essentially. Yeah. I could waffle on, but James, have you got any views?
Yeah, no, thank you, Rob. I completely agree. And actually, when I think back, you and I first met when we were delivering an extremely meaningful piece of very client-focused change when we were at RSA, and that wasn't just words, that was genuine changes to customer journeys, which were built on insight that we knew the clients wanted. So I would always look back on that as being something that was, highly valuable. I think the change has to be meaningful, but I think it also has to be, co-design as well. So bringing people in from all levels of an organisation, as well as thinking horizontally as well across the breadth of the organisation. So getting the right people involved at the right time. And I often think about how organisations fail to bring in functions such as compliance when it comes to design of new customer propositions. I think as well, a lot of it's about inclusivity and credit, being able to give people credit for the great work they do and to not necessarily take credit yourself if it's someone that you're working with that's actually played a huge role in delivering something. I think just calling that out and making sure that everyone gets what the credit and recognition they deserve within an organisation, often more important than money at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important, isn't it, that a customer-centric culture really is across every aspect of a business. And for example, I think people go, "Oh, we've got a great business. We're all for customers because we will, I don't know, reward loyal customers with a gift, or we celebrate wins with our team with Pizza Fridays or whatever." And whilst those sort of perks or they're icing on a cake, if the cake itself doesn't taste very nice, it doesn't really have the desired impact. And I think that's one of the things that we definitely find is to be truly customer centric. It's really hard. So I know Lee's going to bring to life some suggestions in a minute.
Yeah, and guys, I think it's great. It's a good conversation there. There's a few points that I'm gonna hone in on some of the things you said, and I like what you just said there, James, about not just incentivizing through money, but actually giving people recognition. That's huge, and I'll come on to that. We've got a label for that in a minute, but and that links to the point that Rob made about just measuring NPS as being the way that we think that we'll suddenly get customer centric, because actually it's not just about the way you measure, it's about how you lead and coach people to achieve that. So let's get into some of that. I think you didn't fall into my trap, so well done. Whilst there's a couple of answers to that question that quite often get mentioned, and one is purpose and one is values, or stroke customer charter. And actually purpose is massive, because you've got to connect people to the purpose of why we're doing it. That's really important. But to your point, Rob, it's not just about putting it out there and going, we're going to be a customer centric culture, and suddenly you wake up one morning and we have one. It doesn't work like that. But I'm going to look at 3 truths that I think is the answer to this, or certainly will take us in the right step. The first truth, and if you had said values, I would have probably had a good debate with you right now and said, actually, it's not all about values. Now, before anybody gets too kind of uptight about the fact that values aren't important, values are massively important, and so is things like customer charters. But the point here is not all about the values. And we've worked with a couple of organizations that have spent far too long in the space of defining the values and defining the words. And it doesn't really matter whether you put care or whether you put empathy in your statement. They're both really good things to be doing for your customers. But we've had organizations that spend 20 leaders in a room debating whether they use the word care and empathy. And that goes on, and that critiquing goes on for months. And the point here is that if you spend all of that time in a room worrying about the words, you're not doing the hard yards. And the hard yards is the behaviors. Get out into the business and demonstrate those behaviors and connect people to the values. So you need values. Don't spend all of your time worrying about critiquing and choosing the right words. I don't think I've ever walked into an organization and saw some values on the wall that was all about treating employees and customers badly. So truth number 2 then, if we've got some good values, we've moved on, then the second point would be really kind of playing with the word culture. Culture is not the answer, excuse me, controversially. And the reason that I say that is culture is nebulous. Culture is the sum of many parts. It's the shadow of leadership, to use a few phrases. I've worked in businesses that have tried to achieve good cultures, and it's taken 5, 6, 7 years. I can name a couple of businesses that I've worked in where that's been the case. So actually, if we want to create great customer experience, we don't have the luxury of waiting 5 years, especially when next year we've got a lot of pressure from the FCA to get our consumer duty in order, or consumer duty is driving our customer outcomes to be in order. Here's the thing. Team climate is the answer. Team climate eats company culture for breakfast is truth number 2. And what that really means is, when you take a look at some of these stats, ultimately culture is experienced at a team level. So you can't try to change culture and then hope that we have a great organization that innovates, treats customers well, gives discretionary effort, works well within teams, has your back, and delivers for customers. Actually, what you've got to do is you've got to focus on localized teams, because at the end of the day, just to use stat number 1, 75% of people, the reason they leave their job is because of a bad boss. So we can instantly impact team climate, right? If we manage 5 people, that's in our gift as a leader to be able to change the experience those 5 people have. That's a lot easier than an executive team trying to change the experience of 7,000 people. So team climate, not company culture. We can have an instant impact. And we're going to pause on this one for a couple of minutes, and I'm going to just show you this slide here. And this is taking our experience of many, many years of working with customer-centric and businesses that are delivering great customer experience and outcomes today. And we think there's 10 things that you could distill down that these organizations do. And I'm going to whiz through them, pause on a couple to try to bring an example. Now, these are the things that, and it says here, customer experience culture, it's the things that drive a great team climate. But it's also not just the things that leaders do. We can all influence and deliver these behaviors, and we can influence great team climate through our behavior. If I've been in a business for 5 years and someone new joins that team, I can influence those people. I don't have to be the hierarchical leader of the team to have an impact through my behavior. And let's talk about what some of those things are. First of all, Rob mentioned purpose. You've got to have a purpose, but the harder work is it's not just about putting it out in an email and putting it up on the wall. You've got to connect people to it, because different people have different drivers. And this brings James' point in here. Money isn't always the driver for people. It's not always the motivator. Some people are driven by doing the right thing by customer. Some people just want to have a contribution to the greater good. So actually, when you think about the purpose of being more customer centric, You've got to do the hard yards and go out to the organization and speak to people on a one-to-one level. It's not done over email. Leaning in. Leaders, people staying in their lane, delivering their KPIs, and actually maybe KPIs sometimes is the problem that makes people stay in their lane and focus on only their bit of the business. Great service businesses of where we've created a culture or a set of behaviors of collaboration. And I don't just look at my own team climate, but I look at interacting with the teams around me for the benefit of driving good customer outcomes and experience. And that's accountability. Knowing what good looks like. So if we sit there and we only rely on the quality function to know what good looks like, and that is quite often using the customer's name and saying, is there anything else I can help with? Which, by the way, isn't what good looks like. That is not the answer to great customer experiences. But those leaders that know what their high performers do, that have spent time listening to calls and being in front of customers, that know specifically the key things in this business that differentiate good service from average to poor, which is quite often reflected in your NPS, your CSAT, your effort scores, or your E-scores. So good leaders know what good looks like, and they role model it. So that's both in terms of being able to demonstrate that with customers. It's also being able to role model it when they walk around the office. And not just leaders are constantly on show, we all are. I'm going to give one great example here. Jeff Bezos, ASOS. You can say what you like about Amazon, but the one thing they have definitely been recognized is being customer-centric and definitely drive good customer experience and outcomes. The way that Jeff Bezos 10 years ago used to say to his board members, don't sit in that chair there, that chair is for the customer. And every board decision, they would turn and say, what would the customer, if they were in the room, say about that? That's role modeling, because that gets people to always reflect and think about the customer. And those behaviors get noticed down through the organization. We can all role model things like that. So it's walking the talk. Get proximate. So the next one is about proximity. How often as a manager, as a leader, do you take a short walk to your desk in the office? Or how often do you walk around the building speaking to people, and the ones that are dealing with customers, and hear what are the current challenges for your employees and for your customers? And if you can pick up on those things, quite often you as the leader of a function are the person that can fix it too. So it also leads to us to resolve customer problems, not just by connecting with our people. And it's a demonstration of role modeling, right? Going to speed up, but accountable freedom. This is quite often termed or talked about as permission. How do you create a permission culture in the business? But for us, it's a bit deeper than permission. Permission is not easy to create. You can't just sit as a senior leader and say, I give you permission. And then what happens is down through the business, we find that permission gets more restricted, and you ask your frontline people, do you have permission? They say, absolutely not. So where's that disconnect? What happens? Quite often you need to tell stories about when people operate in the shades of grey. What was it that they did to drive a good outcome? And you have to share those stories, because quite often to act with permission is to work in those areas of grey. If it was black and white, it would be processed, it would be written down, it would be easy to follow. But it's when we get those gnarly, unrecognizable situations where we just got to think on our feet. Do we do it because we know it's the right thing to do? And do we act with accountable freedom? Or do we fear reprimand and think, no thanks, I stay within my lane and stick to process? And therefore the customer doesn't get the right outcome or experience. And so the reason we call it accountable freedom, not permission, is we want to give people freedom, but we want them to be accountable for their actions. And that's all about driving accountability in a business. Do we have people that sit and wait and hope and find excuses? Or do we have people that take action, find solutions, and own it? Illuminating awesome is the last one that I'm going to spend any time on, and literally I'm going to move on to the last truth. Illuminating awesome is huge, and actually this really links to the point that James made. We are in businesses culturally stuck at finding things at fault, whether it's listening to calls, customer actions, or walking around our business, constantly finding things to feed back on, And often when we think about feedback, we think of feedback as being developmental. We want to flip that on its head. We don't do this with children. When we have children, we quite often are full of praise, of encouragement. That's amazing. Well done. I loved what you did there when you drew that unrecognizable drawing, but I think I can work out that it's a picture of me. Thank you for that. All of these things that we do to praise and encourage and get them better, we seem to forget in organizations. And eliminating awesome for us is looking for things to praise. It's the behaviors we want to see more of and ignore the ones we don't. And we get obsessed with feeding back developmental conversations. And actually, there's a science that says you need to feed back praise and things that people do well before they listen to developmental feedback. Now, just to be really clear, this is not mindless cheerleading. It's not just clapping all day long and going, oh my God, James, Rob, you both are amazing. I love you. It's about specifically spotting the things that those individuals did well and raising awareness to the behavior so that the behavior can be replicated in them again and in others. Clearing the path, get rid of the problems, continual improvement. You've got to remove barriers. You've got to build trust in people by acting with integrity, and you've got to make a psychological safe environment, and you've got to treat everybody the same. And you've got to create an environment where people can positively challenge and speak up. These things are all really crucial in driving great team climate, and therefore you'll get a customer experience culture. So enough on that point. Third point is a really quick one to make, but it's the final truth around how to drive customer centricity. Focus on the things that drive performance. So this is almost flipping the model on its head. And we've mentioned earlier about create a great culture, customer outcomes will come. And that is true. Some startup businesses, I worked in Virgin Mobile. We launched in 1999. We started with 1 employee, and then we had 500. But it was a model that was replicable, and people joined knowing what good customer centricity looked like, and we were great at delivering good customer outcomes. But not all businesses start from a place of that raw good intent at startup. Some businesses are acquired, they grow, they change direction. And actually, if you try to focus on the culture first, nebulous, big, like shifting an oil tanker, you're not going to get there. So how do you focus on driving performance? Right, here's a couple of case studies of Elevate projects where we specifically had to go and focus on a customer outcome or a customer project, and the intention was to drive performance. So it was a project. But here's the thing. You can see the first 4 points here. First 3 points was how there was some metrics that turn around, like improved SIM ranking, which is the Ofwat table for the water industry in Anglian Water, improved CSAT scores, reduction in complaints. But here's the thing, we weren't focused on increasing employee engagement. We focused on the top 3 metrics, but a byproduct was employee engagement. And that's really interesting. Here's another one. This was a sales and customer experience program focused on design consultants in Wix. £67 million uplift in turnover. That's why we were there. That's what the ambition and the objectives of the project were. We increased speed to value in new starters. Great. And average order value was increased. We weren't there to reduce attrition, but guess what? Sales, service, and management attrition fell from 33% to just 8% in the first year. And these are cultural things. These are employee engagement metrics. So the interesting thing that we started to notice is when you focus on a sales or a service, a performance-related project, you tend to get an increase in employee engagement. So that's culture, right? That's customer-centric culture. So why is that? And here's our view. 4 things to focus on to get an increase in performance. We've already talked about climate. That's the first thing. You've got to create an environment for performance to show up. Shift the mindset. Do work on shifting mindsets, because only when you've shifted mindsets can you focus on the next bit, which is skills and capability. If you haven't got people with a will, a desire to change, then you can't change their skill. So climate, mindset, capability are the 3 things to push performance forward. But what you've got to do is you've got to reduce friction. You've got to take barriers out the way that will inhibit behavior change. And they're the 4 things. First of all, though, if you want to change performance, you've got to know where you're at. You've got to know what your current state of play is. So you've got your ambition, What's the current state of play? Therefore, what's the gap? And to find the gap, we always look at high performers. So if we look at high performers to know what it is we want to achieve and who are the people that are doing it today, quite often our high performers will be a smaller population of our workforce and of that performance range. Because once we've matched and we've looked at what high performance looks like, the job to be done is to move everybody else to that place, right? So to do that, there's a number of things listed here that you can do to assess your current state: observations, one-to-one interviews. You can survey your people, you can run focus groups, you can do desk-based research on the things that they're doing, looking at your metrics, your KPIs. But essentially, you need a set of tools to do that. And good news is, I'm going to drop a QR code right at the end of the presentation, which is only a slide or two away, where you can assess your own state of play in terms of how customer-centric your business is. But also there's a toolkit there, free to download, which will help you to carry out some of this work and will guide you on how to do this work, and also even better on how to close the gap. So I'm going to show you that QR code in a moment, but I want to have a moment of reflection to finish up with. So anybody that's joined us, you can put this in the chat. We can have a chat about it. We can look at your comments. If you're willing to share, how customer-centric is your organization? But thinking about team climate, really, the important bit is, what about your immediate team? What is it about your immediate team that you think is customer-centric or not? And drop that down in the comments so we can have a conversation about it. And then lastly, what aspect of performance could be improved within your team? So is there a particular focus, let's say, for example, on first-term resolution? Or maybe it's actually about having a better complaints conversation. So whatever the service or sales or any other aspect of your business performance that you want to have a look at, have a reflection and think about how can you laser in on it. And then the toolkit, the CX toolkit, will give you an opportunity to measure that, your current state, against your vision, and then a suite of tools to be able to assess yourself and move yourself forward. So that's it from me. So a massive thank you to James for your insight around the difference between outcomes and experience, because I think that's massively valuable and a great tool to be able to assess current state. And I think we've got to really think about that, because over the next year, particularly for those governed by consumer duty, we're going to feel a little bit of pressure in that space, and that's only going to get harder. So, any final comments from James or Rob? But thank you from me to anyone that's joined us, and we can certainly engage with you in the chat, and also we'd love to follow up with anybody that wants to do so.
Thank you, Lee. No, nothing else from me, but as the banner says at the bottom, let us know if you've got any feedback. It's gratefully received.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everybody. Appreciate your time, and look forward to the comments. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.